Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly Potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, Local12.com digital sports columnist and editor. Each and every week, along with my guy Rick Broering, as always, it's presented by Blake, the attorney Maislin. We are trickling towards the end of the college basketball regular season with a lot still to get to. Conference tournament season right around the corner. Spring training is underway. Reds play their first game this coming Saturday in Goodyear, Arizona. And, of course, we've got Bengals news in the offseason galore. I can't wait till next week when I get to go to the Combine for a couple of days. What a thrilling time that will be for all. Rick, we got a lot to get to. Let's get to it.
Yeah, you mentioned the Reds will play their first spring training games on Saturday. They had their first full squad workout on Monday. We're still over a month away from opening day on March 27th, but it's time, Skinny. We got to start talking a little Reds. People are going to start asking, like, hey, pitchers and catchers reported. What's going on? Why aren't you guys talking Reds yet? So while we still got some time until the opening day, we'll do all our predictions and stuff a little bit later on. Let's get into talking about some of the position battles that are going to take place here at spring training. We'll start with the starting pitchers because I think this is an area where they're hoping to be improved. I think they will be improved, but they're also dealing with some injury setbacks here to start spring training. It feels like Green, Lodolo are definitely set. You would think Abbott would be set too in that starting rotation, although he's dealing with a shoulder injury right now. Rhett Lauder probably in that group, although he's dealing with an elbow injury right now. What else are you looking at in terms of the starting pitching rotation?
I mean, I think if everybody that you pencil down is healthy, it's 6 guys for 5 spots unless you want to go to a 6-man rotation. Some teams are actually talking about dabbling in that this year. Because then you got obviously Brady Singer, they got the Jonathan India trade, and then Nick Martinez, who was just such a valuable guy in both starting and relieving roles. In a perfect world, Rhett Lauder is in your rotation. In a perfect world, Andrew Abbott's in your rotation. So there's 4. I mean, you didn't get Brady Singer to come over here to be a reliever, I don't think. I think he would probably be the 5th guy. And then I do think Nick Martinez fills that valuable I don't want to call it long role, but a guy who on a given day can be a 3-inning bridge. And I just think that's an important piece to have, but also a guy that you can fall back on as a starter. I honestly think if Rhett Lauder's healthy, I think he might be their second best pitcher, Rick. I know it was a small sample size, but he was a first-round pick. He was terrific in college. He fast-tracked through the system, rightfully so. And then when he came up last year, I thought he not only was good. I thought at times he was great. So hopefully this is a minor setback. I know they talked about taking him along slowly, bringing him along slowly in the spring, and that's fine. There's no reason to rush the guy. I think it's the one thing that shows up here is it's a good thing you do have some depth. I mean, you don't have to all of a sudden go, all right, we got to scramble for a 4th or 5th starter. No, there's going to be, in a perfect world, an odd man out with some other help potentially on the way as well. And so I'm interested to see how quickly can Lauder get back? What's the situation with Abbott? And then if you have everybody, what do you do with that Martinez-Singer situation?
Yeah, I mean, what are you thinking ideally? What would you like it? What would you like it to look like? Green, Lodolo, Abbott, Lauder, Singer?
Yeah, and then put Martinez in that. Again, I don't want to call it long role because that always has the mop up guy. Now it's this day and age, that role to me is
versatility role, maybe
versatility role. Yeah, I mean a guy who can on a day when Hunter Green is pitching great and has all of a sudden reached his pitch limit at 5 2/3 innings. Nick Martinez can come in and maybe bridge the rest of the game out for you. And I think that's just a really important role.
Yeah, in a game where, by the way, the other team hasn't scored yet or only has 2 hits or something. It's not a game necessarily that's mop-up duty, to your point.
Correct.
The bullpen, it feels like they have a number of good options to me. Yes, this is the area of the team that I really feel like they did significantly upgrade during this offseason. Anything particular that you're interested in here with the bullpen?
Yeah, I want to see what's Taylor Rogers maybe has left in the tank. That is he going to be the 3rd lefty? I mean, they've got 3 lefties I think that can really give you something in Sam Moll, Brent Suter, and then Rogers. Rogers could also, in my opinion, I mean, he's done it before, could close games out on days when Alexis Diaz has maybe gone a couple of days in a row closing games out. And then there's just a bunch of arms that have a shot to fill maybe that whatever 13th, 12th, or 13th role in the bullpen. I think there's a lot of good bullpen battles to watch during spring training. There's so many guys to name. I'm not going to name them all. You can go to local12.com. I got them all listed there. And you can look at some of those battles for yourself. But I think it's a good thing that it's not like, okay, we got to fall back on that guy. And, oh, yeah, by the way, we got to have a guy fill it out, and it's going to be – no, I think there's going to be legitimate arms in that bullpen. There's not going to be a guy you go, boy, I don't think I can count on him, or we're rolling the dice with that guy. I think there's a lot of good options.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like there are innings eaters there or young guys that you're going, well, he's just going to have to do for right now. It feels like everyone is a real major league caliber pitcher that's in that bullpen right now. And I think they have some depth. I think they have, like you said, multiple lefties in there. I mean, they've got the makings of a really nice bullpen. That's one area of this team that I feel pretty confident about going into the start of the season.
Agreed.
Looking at the infield, Skinny,
Ooh.
tell me what you like. I mean, because there are a couple options here in terms of how you want to do this. What alignment do you like the best going into it here without having seen any of these
All
guys
right.
yet this
So,
year?
so this is just my own opinion. I know that fans are going to scoff at this. I know the Reds would scoff at this, and this is not going to happen. But my own opinion would be either Jamer or Christian Encarnacion Strand at first, and you can depend on how you want to do that against whatever pitching, and then maybe the fallback plan is that guy's the DH, or Spencer Steer falls into the DH role maybe. I like Lux at second, McLean at short, and Ellie at third. I know that's not how it's going to shake out. I think Ellie's better suited as a third baseman. He's just so quick and reactionary. I mean, he's a great shortstop in several ways, but he still botches the routine play every once in a while. So that's not going to happen. So then, what do you do with the McLean Lux situation? I mean, if it's me and Matt McLean's back to Matt McLean of 2023, he's an everyday player. So what does that do for at bats for Gavin Lux in that circumstance? I think you want to give him, honestly, if things were 350 to 400 at bats this year. And then at third base, do you put Candelario there some? Do you put Steer there some? Do you put Lux there some? You got a lot of options there. I think the odd guy out is going to be Noelvi Marte, and maybe that's not a bad thing either. Maybe the best thing for him is to spend a month or two at AAA, and if he's crushing it down there, and he's the guy you thought he was, there's going to be an injury, as we all know, at some point somewhere, and he can be ready to come back up. I think that's the perfect world. That's the thing I'm interested in, is how does this really all shake out in the infield? Because there's a lot of different options Terry Francona can play with.
I was confused there as you were talking because I'm hearing you talk and I'm thinking, well, what's the issue then? Who is the odd man out that he's worried about? I didn't realize you still think Noelvi Marte might be in that mix. I think he's a definite minor league guy to start the year.
Yeah, I do too. No, I'm with you in that regard. So, I mean, if you're keeping your infielders, it's CES, Jamer, and I'm going to put Steer in the outfield for right now, just because.
Same. I got him starting left field.
Yeah, so CES, Jamer, Gavin Lux, McLean, Ellie, and then Santiago Espinal as your utility guy. And I'm probably missing. No, I guess I'm not missing because I put Steer in the outfield.
Yeah, I don't know. I know you said Candelario before. I don't know if you did just now when you were naming off guys. But yeah, I mean, I like Candelario at first, McLean at second, Ellie at shortstop. I mean, I get your point about third. I'm fine with that. I don't think they're actually going to consider that. So McLean at second, Ellie at short. Lux at third, and CES as the DH, obviously Stevenson catching. That would be my ideal alignment going into the season. Obviously, there's a lot of question marks there. There's the Noelvi Marte, there's the CES question about how both of those guys are coming back. There's the McLean question. I mean, there are a lot of moving pieces with this roster, and I think it can be easy as a Reds fan or even as a media person from an outside perspective looking at this Reds team. And if you want to go off of the projections for all these young players based on what we thought they were going to be going into last year, then I think it's easy to talk yourselves into this Reds team being really good.
Right. No, right. I'm with you. But I think that's
the problem we have last year to go off of that told us a lot of these guys weren't necessarily what we thought they were going to be last year. So
yeah, but again,
we're injured.
Two of them were hurt. I mean, CES clearly played through the injury. That's why the numbers stunk. And obviously McLean didn't play because of the injury. I think that's the thing that Reds fans have to really understand here, in my opinion, is your rebuild was built around these young guys being good. Well, let's see if they are. I don't think we've seen that. I don't think there's proof either way of that yet. And I think that's what we need to find out still.
Well, there's not proof either way, but the only evidence we have to this point suggests that they aren't what we thought they were going to be.
That is.
Yeah. And well, I mean, that's concern. Like this team, unless everyone lives up to those previous expectations that we're over a year removed from now, I don't know that this team is much better. That would be my concern.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I just think, again, that's what you're basing this rebuild on, is that
exactly. That's a concern.
And I'm fine with that. That's why those that are wringing their hands if they didn't go get a power bat in the outfield or in the corner infield, who was there to go get? I mean, honestly, at the budgetary stuff, I mean, Luis Robert, come on, that dude is a washed up hack, in my opinion.
I mean, Skinny, you can say there wasn't the options for them to go get, or there wasn't the right answer out there, but that doesn't remove the problem of their talent level still isn't at the level that's going to compete.
We don't know that, though. See, we don't know that.
We don't know that, but all of the Reds' recent history suggests that you should probably aim on the pessimistic side of projections with them than the optimistic side. And last year, what happened last year is we all thought all these young guys were going to magically develop into stars, and it didn't happen. And now we're basically running it back with the same group saying, well, maybe this year they'll actually be stars.
Well,
And I realize some of them were injured.
But yeah, I think you have to factor that. I mean, Matt McClain didn't even play.
Sure, but he's also now an entire year removed from sitting out and being injured, and who knows if he gets back to form. That's the other part of that. Like, I understand that maybe all of these things will work out great for the Reds, and that's what they're hoping for. But from a realistic perspective, the odds of that happening when it didn't happen last year, not very good.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say is I don't know how much, and I don't know how much you need this team to be an offensive juggernaut if the pitching staff's as good as we think it is either.
But again, I'd go back to, I think the pitching staff can be solid, it can be good, but it's not like this team was right on the cusp or just missed last year.
Oh, understood.
They stunk.
Understood.
So it's like you have to be significantly better. You can't just be like, oh yeah, the pitching staff is so great that a little bit of offensive help will be enough. No, you got to be way better than you were in all aspects of the game this year.
That's a fair point.
What about the outfield?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you got 5 spots, right? You got Friedel, Fraley. I'm putting Steer in the outfield for the moment. Austin Hayes, and in my opinion, Stuart Fairchild. The odd guy out's Will Benson. I mean, you talk about a guy who got a chance to prove it and didn't. That was him. And sorry, guy, you had a whole year to prove yourself there, and you really didn't do it.
Yeah, I did completely agree with that. I don't think Benson is going to be a factor this year. Unfortunately, he's another guy that, like, going into last year, it was like, hey, Will Benson could be a breakout star. Look at this talent. And we saw what happened with that. Hopefully this year they won't have to rely on him. Any other thoughts in terms of the position battles or what you're hoping to see out of the next couple of weeks here in spring training?
I'm just not so sure there's anybody that forces their way onto the roster, to be honest with you. I think it feels like it's a pretty set group for the most part. It's just a matter of where do the infield pieces shake out. And then probably from a platoon perspective, how do you platoon the outfield? Like Friedel starts in center for sure. Against lefties, Steers in left, and Hayes is in right. And then against righties, perhaps it's Jake Fraley in right, Steer stays in left. Maybe Steer becomes a left fielder the whole season. So I do think you have a little bit of better options against lefties this year. Maybe Friedel comes out against lefties, and Stuart Fairchild, who actually isn't awful against lefties. He's not a great player overall, but he's not awful against lefties. Maybe he gets a handful of starts against lefties, because let's not forget, this was not a very good team against left-handed pitching last year.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I think really, to your point about it feels like the roster is set, that is, in a way, I guess it makes me feel better about this group, that if you are going to have someone make the team that's unexpected, they're going to have earned it. I mean, they're going to have clearly beat out someone that looks like an incumbent starter.
Who was the guy that hit the home run? Was it Martini? Nick Martini last year?
Yeah.
Or 2 year, whatever it was. Remember Mike Ford from last year?
Mike Ford. No, who was our guy who started at first base the year before?
Oh, I'm drawing a blank. That wasn't Martini, was it? No.
There was a
I'm drawing a blank. I
know
what you're saying. Yeah. It was a great
lasted for like 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
The most no-name Reds player of all time.
Like had a triple on opening day, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I'm told. I know exactly what you're saying. I'm drawing a blank on the name.
Yeah, I'm looking up the last year's opening day roster.
I think it was I thought that was a big Nick Martini day early in the year.
It might have been. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before.
No, it was 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago, and I can't think of the first baseman's name. You're gonna make me look it up now on Baseball Reference, aren't you?
Yeah, we've got to see Vossler, Jason Vossler.
Jason Vossler, the great Jason Vossler. Great
shout out to our guy Jason Vossler. Yeah. What's he up to now? Let's check out Jason Vossler's Wikipedia page.
I'm gonna say that he was either in AAA for someone last year, or he's out of baseball, or maybe even over in Japan.
Bingo.
All right,
he was the third baseman and first baseman for the Chunichi Dragons of the Nippon Professional Baseball.
I'm going to say he slugged 28 home runs over there.
The NPB. I don't know. I'm not going deep enough to look up his Asian stats. Fair enough. Shout out to Jason Vossler, Reds opening day legend. Let's move on to college basketball, Skinny. We'll start with Xavier. They beat DePaul 85-68 on Saturday and Butler 76-63 on Tuesday. Both of those games were at the Cintas Center. They go to Seton Hall on Sunday. I guess the good news, both of those games were expected wins for Xavier, obviously. They took care of business. I guess the good news there is that Butler looks like a very favorable matchup for them because you do have to play Butler again at Butler.
They can't guard.
Yeah. And that's exactly like the teams that have given Xavier the most trouble this year are the teams that are more athletic than them, the teams that can crawl up in them defensively, take away their ball rotations and take away their 3-point shots. Butler doesn't do any of that, obviously. And Butler really lacks athleticism at a couple of positions that help Xavier out big time.
Yeah, no, I think that matchup's fine for them. And again, you look at bracket matrix. I think they're the number three. They're the third team of the ones listed as out at the moment. So I mean, you're creeping right to where you want to creep to.
It almost does feel to some extent like it's a battle of attrition now at the bubble, where if
Yes,
you can just be the last team to not lose, you will maintain your spot and end up fighting your way in, assuming there aren't a couple of bid stealers in the
I mean,
conference tournament.
will the committee really put 14 SEC teams in the tournament?
Who knows at this point? Like, if not, they'll just expand it in 2026 so they get that many in. We'll talk about that in a second. But Skinny, now that it's down to 4 games left for Xavier, I mean, we kept talking about like, them winning 8 in a row or them winning 7 in a row seems improbable. But now that you get it down to just 4 games left, you've won a couple of the more difficult ones. How likely is it, do you think, that they can win out these final 4 games of the regular season?
I think they absolutely can. Again, is it going to be enough to put your resume to where you don't have to go to New York and do something? Now, listen, I don't think the committee I think the committee very often doesn't even look at what happens in conference tournaments. But again, if you get another quad 1 or 2 on there in the conference tournament, it's not going to hurt.
Right. That's the way I look at it. I always say, to me, we just have so many examples of teams going into their conference tournament thinking they accomplished something there and then not being rewarded for it at all when it comes to actually making the field or moving your seed line. So I just don't think they really take it into consideration very much. But you're right. It's better to have an extra quad 1 win on your resume than not if you do get that in the Big East tournament. KenPom has them as projected 80% chance to win at Seton Hall, 52% chance to win, 75-74 the projected score at home against Creighton, 50% complete toss-up at Butler, 77-76 the projected score there.
Yeah, I don't buy that.
And then 79-71 a win, 76% chance at home against Providence, the final game. Now, the Butler game, we just talked about how great of a matchup that looked like for Xavier. It is at Hinkle, and it is a road. I mean, it is complete. It's senior day at Hinkle. That rivalry.
Are they playing during the daylight with the sun coming in through the glass?
That's all that matters about Hinkle. Everyone tells me it's such a picturesque place to play basketball, and it's so amazing. Even though it's just an old.
You are such a turd at times. It's awesome.
I mean, it's a barn without a water fountain anymore. I mean, Kenny Freeze take care of that. What?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you want from the place? Yeah, I'm with you. I think Xavier has a legit chance to win out now. I think it's more likely they go 3-1 down the stretch and they fumble one of these games away, but I think they have a pretty good chance to go 4-0 all of a sudden. And if they do that, it feels like that might be just enough to be the last team in or so.
Yeah, no, it again, at the 9-game mark when we said they got to go 8-1, 7-2, and if they do that, at least you did what you had to do, basically. You may look back and go, boy, the Villanova game at Villanova was the one they needed to steal and just didn't. That's what cost them. Well, there's other games this year that cost them too.
That's what's going to be so hard for Xavier fans to swallow. I mean, it already is, but when you get down to it, if they do miss it, there are infinite opportunities to look back at and say, oh, you had a big lead there in the second half. You had a lead in the final few minutes and the game went to overtime, then you lose at UConn. The UC game, you were up by multiple possessions with like 4 minutes to go, and then it completely flipped on you. I mean, there are so many quad 1 opportunities or big win opportunities that turned around on them in late game situations that I guess that's when it gets down to it, that's probably why you don't deserve to get in if that's how it plays out. Yeah. Since Cincinnati, Skinny lost at Iowa State on Saturday, 81-70, and at West Virginia, 62-59 on Wednesday. They host TCU on Saturday. I think the UC people have waved the white flag. I think they've accepted their fate now that they're not getting into the tournament without making a run to the Big 12 championship and winning that.
I mean, the only thing they can do is win out, and that would include winning at Houston. Good luck with that.
Yeah. The West Virginia game was a difficult one to watch. They had a lead late there. I think it was 3 minutes left or so. They were up. Yeah. Then all of a sudden, I mean, they didn't score for 5 minutes, basically. And and West Virginia ended up with a pretty big lead. All of a sudden, Dan Skillings throws in 2 threes in a matter of like 3 seconds there in the final 10 seconds to make it a one possession game. And then Tyler Betsy got a wide open 3 from the top of the key that would have tied the game at the buzzer somehow, which UC should have never been in that position. But
How
they
about if you
were.
by the way, how about if you had West Virginia minus 3.5?
Brutal beat.
Brutal beat. One of the worst I've ever seen.
I mean, they were up by 9 points with what, 12 seconds?
Well, yes. Yeah, 12 seconds by the time that I think that first 3 got banked in. Yes.
I mean, just crazy to lose that cover. And by the way, Tyler Betsy should have tied the game and sent it into overtime with a wide open
chance.
there.
Yeah, to give you a second chance to cover.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I mean, Day and Jizzle James go, 11 for 31?
Just terrible shooting. But, I mean, Jizzle's been the guy carrying you the last few games.
Yeah, he's been great of late. But, I mean, again, they just don't have enough firepower. And, I feel for UC fans because I don't know what the fix is because the fix isn't going to be the head coach at the moment.
Well, it's interesting because in the offseason, I remember like the big thing was thumping the chest about how much NIL they had. And Cincy Light was hooking them up and they had really surpassed Xavier in that regard. And they were ruling the city in NIL. And now all of a sudden the PR wheels are spinning for Wes. And it's like, well, they don't have enough NIL money. They're in the bottom third of the conference with NIL. And it's like, well, I mean, I'm sorry, man. At some point, you guys are just like, you're crossing your lines of communication here with your PR team. You got to get it figured out. I think you've spent plenty of money on this roster. I think there are 2 issues for Wes. The big one, in my opinion, is he doesn't know how to coach toughness. He built a roster that should have been based around toughness and athleticism, and they have no toughness. They don't rebound. They don't get to the free throw line ever, and they don't have any mental toughness in late game situations. So all the stuff he preaches are mostly just cliches and platitudes. He doesn't actually know how to coach the things that are important when it comes to being tough. And if you want to start making arguments about NIL and putting together the roster, which you can make that argument, I guess, then you basically just have to say he doesn't know what he's doing when it comes to finding guys that want to play his style of play, because clearly they're not. If you're saying it's the player's fault, then clearly he doesn't know the type of players to get.
So here's my question then. So what is his style of play?
That's the problem. I think he wants to be this defensive minded, tough team, but he doesn't coach any of the elements that would lead to toughness, like getting to the free throw line, like rebounding. I mean, they have no elements of that within their style of play.
Yeah, and I don't know what the fix is on the horizon. I know everybody's counting on Sean Abayev to come in and be the guy, and he could be the guy. That's a guy. That's a guy.
Yeah, I do think there might need to be more of a focus, and probably a lot of teams are figuring this out. I don't think there's a perfect perfect formula that's been discovered yet to assemble a roster in this NIL and transfer portal era, especially if you're not at the elite levels. But I do think there may need to be more of a focus on finding at least a dude, a top tier guy, instead of spreading yourself thin and trying to find 6 to 8 guys that can play at this level. Maybe you just need to find 2 studs at this level, and you'll live with some mid-major guys on the back end. Because
and toughness guys around them, glue guys around them.
Yeah, some guys that have real transferable skills that like if you just had one guy who was an MFer on the glass who could just really, really rebound and maybe defend for you, I think you could get away with that easier than both. I think UC and Xavier are kind of in the same boat this year where they have a lot of guys who they can start for almost any high major team, but you don't have any guys that can take over, that can win you games, that show up when the game's on the line in the final few minutes.
Yeah, no, I agree.
One of the stats going around now, we've seen this a few times this year. Wes is now 7-36 in quad 1 games.
Yeah, I saw the 7-35. So yeah, 7-36 now. Ooh.
Yeah. Seamus Lukosius was out for this West Virginia game.
Not to be a jerk about this, because I'm going to come off as a jerk. What is Mark Pope this year in quad 1 games? Just this year?
He has 8 quad 1 wins now, or 9?
That's right. That sounds right. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I mean, that's probably enough on UC. I don't know really what else to say about them right now, other than it seems like, they are definitely going to have Wes Miller back again next year. And if you're a UC fan, I completely understand why that would be really frustrating and disheartening.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I can't imagine if next year unfolds like this year's unfolded, how miserable that will be for everybody involved. Just miserable.
Yeah.
And I hope it doesn't. I mean, hopefully the kid, the McDonald's All-American, is going to be great, and he finds some other pieces, and next year turns into a surprising fun year. I mean, I'm going to guess there'll be some fans that would go, "Well, I hope they're not good because I hope we get rid of the guy." Well, you say that now, but if things go well during the season, you're going to take it and run with it. And I would too. I get it, but hopefully that's the case. But boy, if it just starts to fall apart like last year fell apart, this year's falling apart, then what misery.
Here's the thing. The reality is your best case scenario if you're Cincinnati is for West to figure it out and be good.
Right? No,
You
that's
have
right.
him locked up. You have him at an affordable price for
That's right.
years to come. And by the way, if you want to get rid of the athletic director and the football coach too, you got to keep somebody for a little
Yeah.
bit. You got to
No,
have
that's
some
right.
time to work all this stuff out. So if West could figure it out by next year, and again, the transfer portal does help somewhat with that concept because you can completely change your roster by next year. It's not like you have to run it back with the same group of guys, and I'm sure they won't. Now, do you have a lot of faith that they can bring in the right guys in the offseason? Maybe not. But again, that's your best hope if you're a UC fan is for West to get it right because I don't know who you go out and get. That's the other thing. Who are you just with the financial situation you're in your athletic department? Who do you go out and hire as a head coach that's going to get this thing rolling in the right direction in the Big 12?
Great point.
Kentucky lost at Texas 82-78 and then beat Vanderbilt at Rupp 82-61. They go to Alabama on Saturday. That Texas game, I was watching that in my hotel room, Skinny. That was a fun game. I know UK fans didn't have fun watching the end of that one, but it was a fun game to watch. UK had the lead by 5 with 3 minutes to go on the road, and then they just absolutely fell apart there the final few minutes. I felt like that was a game where you can easily point and go, if Lamont Butler's out there, they don't lose that game. Those turnovers don't happen in that late game situation with Lamont Butler, your point guard, on the floor.
Yeah, so they did the seed reveal on Saturday. Kentucky was a 3 seed. The hand wringing began again after the loss to Texas. Of oh God, how far are they going to fall? They right the ship a little bit with the Vandy win. I didn't see the seed reveal, but I understand that the head of the committee, I think it's North Carolina's AD, good old Bubba Cunningham, did mention the injuries Kentucky has gone through, how they've taken some of that into account. And I think the thing that would help is to win a game like the Vandy game without that you can then go back and point to the tough games that they lost without a couple of key guys. Jackson Robinson also is out as well. Again, it's not a complete excuse, and they also have a really good resume with all the quad one wins. I mean, I think they're 8-7 in quad ones, and they have one quad two loss, if I'm not mistaken, Rick. And so you really don't have a bad loss on your resume at the moment.
8-7 quad one, 1-1 in quad
One and
two.
one quad two. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think last night was a quad two, was it not? The Vandy game was a quad two.
Yeah, I believe that's right. So, I think Kentucky's big wins makes it a lot easier to look at the games they're losing without Lamont Butler, without Jackson Robinson, and going, yeah, see, they're a different team. They can play with anyone in the country when they are healthy. So I do think they are going to get a little bit of credit for playing with those guys injured. And again, when you go to their resume, Skinny, it's as good as anyone in the country's, maybe aside from some of the losses, the number of losses that they've piled up. But in the SEC this year, pretty much everyone except for Auburn is piling up losses.
Correct. And they get a chance. I'm telling you, that game, what is it, a week or so plus when they play Auburn at home, if they got a chance to get back to full strength for that game, that would be something. That's going to be something.
That will be a fantastic matchup, especially with the way Kentucky plays against all these top opponents. They play so well in those big games. Now, here's the thing. I was just thinking about this today. Mark Poke's done a great job this year. I don't think anyone could argue that. It's been a really fun season from that perspective, winning all the big games that they have. But I'm curious, if Cal was in this same spot, had he stayed the head coach at Kentucky, and he had a record that was 6-6 in SEC play, now 7-6 after the win over Vandy, basically the same exact season that's unfolded this year, what do you think UK fans would be doing right now? What would be the reaction?
I think the one difference is the understanding that Mark Pope really had to totally rebuild the roster. I mean, it
Yeah.
would be one thing if Cal still had Big Z, Wagner, if Boogie Fland had come to Kentucky as he was going to. If he had those guys, then I think there'd be some hand wringing. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I think there is a honeymoon period for Mark Pope, but there's a honeymoon period on part of the fact of he also had to rebuild the entire roster.
And he deserves that. I'm not at all trying to say they should be
No,
judged
I know
the
your
same
point.
way.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
more so just looking at it like, this feels like, everyone's really happy. And by the way, not every UK fan is happy. There are plenty of UK fans after the Texas loss that thought like, once again, they're flirting with the bubble and the whole season's spiraling on them. And I don't understand that mentality this year because it feels like you're kind of playing with house money.
I do, Rick, because I think there's a lot of people still set in the days of looking and going, boy, 8 losses. That's probably an 8 or 9 seed, and a couple of more, and you're slipping. No, man, not in today's college basketball landscape. Not in these super conferences. No, 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 no. That's not the case. And I think people are stuck in that mind. I mean, remember the old 10-loss Tubby? Well, 10 losses is almost the norm nowadays. It's going to be the norm for really good teams.
Yeah, great point. And that's the thing with the SEC you're just going to have to get used to. Winning on the road in the SEC is not a guarantee for anybody, no matter who you're playing. Every team is really good, and especially when you're playing on the road. And I also think like the transfer portal aspect of this, guys only being together for a couple months every season, is going to change some of your resolve and your ability to be so consistent and dominate your conference. I mean, just look across the entire sport at all the blue bloods, North Carolina, Kansas, all these schools that have been traditional powerhouses that are struggling right now. There's clearly more parity than ever for a reason, because Nike and Adidas are no longer deciding who gets to be good every year.
No, that's a good point. By the way, Kentucky's defensive metric has just gone off the charts. They went from above 100 to, I think I looked earlier, so I think they're at 68 now. I mean, that's not great, but you talk about a vast improvement in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, they're at 68 today, 5th in offensive efficiency, 68th in defense. And we always talk about, Final Four teams, you want to try to be top 20 in both, but they are elite on the offensive side of things in terms of their efficiency at 5. That can sometimes give you a little more wiggle room. And they're showing the improvement now if you look at the last probably 2 or 3 weeks, they probably are a top 20 defensive team over that span, because to play their way into, a 60 spot improvement on KenPom, they'd have to be doing some pretty good things there.
Yep.
All right, let's switch gears to NKU. They won at Green Bay 73-60, then lost at Milwaukee 92-70. They lost to Milwaukee at Truist Arena by 20, then lost at Milwaukee by 22 over the weekend. Terrible matchup for them, apparently. They go to Wright State on Friday and host IU Indy this Sunday. Skinny, I think the thing that would be most disheartening for me as an NKU fan is you go into the season, you think with Etijere and Trey Robinson and LJ Wells, the one thing where teams are not going to be able to beat you is that forward spot, the front court, rebounding. And for Milwaukee to punk them on the glass the way they did in both games, I mean, 9 offensive rebounds for JaMychal Stillwell, the starting forward for Milwaukee. They just completely dominated the offensive glass and second chance points 2 times against the Norse.
How was Darren Horn in that post game?
Better, because, I think he felt like his team really came out and competed the right way to start the game, and they did. I mean, it was a great game for the first half, basically. But in the second half, it kind of fell by the wayside, and they got punked again inside. And I think there's a little bit of acknowledgement there that this year's team isn't as tough as he'd like them to be. And he's having to accept that a little bit.
Yeah, and that's a tough pill to swallow for any coach, I think. It really, truly is. So I do have to ask you this. So how was radio coach in Green Bay?
So here's the interesting thing about that. After that game, we talked actually on air, even in our post-game interview with Darren Horn on the radio, about how, everyone's talking about this Green Bay team and making jokes at their expense and talking about the 21-game losing streak after NKU had beaten them. But they didn't look like a clown show. And then after we got done with the interview, I even talked about it a little more off air with Darren, that they seem pretty organized and pretty together, and they still pretty scrappy and seem to be trying to do what he's asking them to do. It feels like you're kind of thankful you got out of there with a win. Like they were good enough to beat someone. And then sure enough, the very next game they pop Wright State, which couldn't happen to a better team, obviously. But it's weird because as much as you want to make fun of him, and he's maybe earned some of that with the way he's done his radio show over the last decade plus. There's part of me that thinks he's doing a decent job with a terribly untalented roster. I know that sounds weird.
Did you read the Athletic story on him?
I did not. Was it recent?
Excuse me. Yeah, and it was really, really good. It just talked about him trying to juggle both jobs, and I thought that was a fascinating read.
Yeah, the funny thing is when they were at NKU, he came over about 2 hours before the game as the teams were coming out. His team was coming out to warm up a little bit. Maybe it was about 90 minutes. And he came over and just talked to me and Jim Kelch for 10, 15 minutes. And he was kind of joking about that. He's like, everyone's making such a big deal out of me trying to juggle the 2 jobs. He's like, it's not that big of a deal. I just don't go sit in my hotel room and call my coach buddies up and BS about refs and that type of stuff all day long. He's like, I just go down and do a radio show for a couple hours, and then I go to practice or whatever. It's not that big of a grind. And I thought that was kind of interesting. It was almost like he was trying to explain it to us, like, this really isn't distracting me, guys. I'm fine. I'll be okay.
Honestly, if you have a subscription to The Athletic, hopefully you're right. I thought it was a fascinating read. Again, Doug can be unlikable. I think I like him on the radio. Actually, I do. I like I like him as an analyst. I still think it's a very tough. I think the one thing he needs probably is a older, more established assistant coach. That would probably help things a lot.
He has a very young staff and a very inexperienced staff. So I think there are a lot of people who kind of feel that way about changes that need to be made there. But the other thing is you're going to have to get talent. And that's always difficult at Green Bay. I think it's even more difficult in an era where people are paying players to go elsewhere. Like, again, asking someone to go up to Green Bay in the winter months, unless they're really into Lambeau Field, it's a tough sell. There's just
Well, I
nothing
think
to do there.
I think mid-major is really a tough sell because now if you really develop a really good mid-major guy, he gone. I mean, look at the kid at Oakland who's playing at Arizona. I'm drawing up the Townsend kid,
Trey
right?
Townsend, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's a terrific player in that league, and he's a good player for Arizona. If you have one of those guys, you're probably going to lose him.
Yeah, there's that, but there's also like, I mean, look at what Green Bay did last year. In one season, they had the biggest turnaround in college basketball. One coach was there for 1 year with one roster that he completely revamped, and they were atop the conference that year. So it can be done, but man, in this NIL era where you've got to pay people, and by the way, like the sell to people now at the mid-major level is come here for a year, build up your profile, and then go get a bag at the high major level. But there's a lot of other places you can do that other than Green Bay where it's going to be miserable for the next 3+ months.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk a little bit about, we'll blend here, college sports. College basketball tournament is being talked about again in terms of expansion. Pat Forty said sources are telling him there's continued momentum towards a 76-team NCAA tournament field for 2026. I was just looking at this, Skinny. There are 7 teams not currently in the field on bracket matrix, but still showing up in some bracket. So they're on the bubble. Those schools, 2 ACC schools, 2 Big 12 schools, a Big 10 school, an SEC school, and a Big East school. So my point to you is if they're going to expand this thing, isn't it clear that there are just going to be a few more crappy high major teams in with really bad records?
So yes, but here would be what I would like to see happen is let's just say it's 76, right? That's 8 extra teams.
Yep.
That 6 of those can come however you want. That 2 of them come from leagues. Let's just say the Missouri Valley champion gets busted. And that was, you thought it was just that, that's became a 1-bid league. I'd like to see those teams get at least 2 of those eight slots. Like Indiana State last year was deserving to be in my opinion. I mean, they were, right?
Sure.
And didn't because it became a numbers thing and didn't get in. I think if you had some criteria like that, and maybe you go 4-4, and I get why some of these, I mean, like, as we mentioned, the norm nowadays is if you can break even in your conference, you got a shot to get in the tournament. You may be closing in on the bubble-ish thing there. I just think it's hard, and I get it. So if you do, and I'm not here to tell you I want expansion, but if you do, I want some of the little guys, if you will, no offense, not Horizon League little guys to get extra bids, but kind of that Missouri Valley, MAC-ish level. Let them get an extra bid or 2.
Yeah, I am with you 100% on that. The problem is we know that's not what they're going to do.
I understand.
They are going to just put in more mid-level, teetering, high major teams, and that's what sucks about this is 64 was perfect. That was the perfect number. It worked for the bracket. Now the bracket, you've got all these like, you got the play-in game. You got to fill in here. It's annoying.
I love the play-in game, man. We've seen a couple of play-in teams do terrific. I mean, UCLA and NC State have done terrific from the play-in.
I'm not here to complain about the expansion or the play-in games because it really hasn't bothered me that much, but 64 was the perfect number. I mean, it was plenty of teams to begin with. It's not like worthy teams were really being left out and the bracket was perfect. It was easy to do. Now with all the play-in games, it kind of sucks. It's annoying. But now that we're already at that point, I don't really care that you add a few more teams in. I just don't think anyone is clamoring or needs an extra couple Big 10 teams in or an extra couple SEC teams in a year like this. When look at the bubble. The bubble is terrible right now. The team like Xavier is about to stay in the hunt, and we've been saying for a month they should be out already.
Right, but I can see coaches clamoring for this, right? Because at the end of the day, on your resume, it says either you're an NCAA tournament coach or you're not, right? So I understand coaches clamoring for this.
Well, Skinny, it's exactly what we talked about when we first mentioned going to these super conferences. Everyone thinks they're going to be at the top of them. Then they start realizing, oh no, someone has to finish in the bottom half every single year, and we may never get into the top half ever. And so all these coaches start realizing, I'm going to lose my job every 3 or 4 years because we don't have the resources to ever make it to the top half of the league, and we're never going to play in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah,
So
I'm so interested in the college sports landscape in the next 5 to 10 years. There's part of me that thinks these super conferences get busted up again and micro conferences come out of this.
it almost feels like there has to be a separation of football and everything else,
Yeah.
where everything else sort of either goes back to normalcy or we just kind of lose it
Yeah.
altogether. At least lose fan interest in it the way it once was.
I mean, I just have a hard time wrapping my arms around Minnesota UCLA being a conference game.
I
And
think,
I know Mick Cronin has a hard time wrapping his head around his team missing a bunch of shots and blowing a 17-point lead.
oh yes, future Indiana Hoosiers head coach Mick Cronin you're talking
That's
about.
right.
Also, on the football side of things, Yahoo Sports reported it's a matter of when, not if, the college football playoff will expand to 14 or 16 teams, assigning multiple automatic qualifiers to each the SEC and the Big Ten, which, by the way, the SEC and the Big Ten hold sole discretion on the future format for the college football playoff starting in 2026 and for the next 6 years after that. So they're going to do whatever they want. It basically sounds like this is what they're going to do. It's just a matter of, do they want 14 or 16 teams? The new format would grant 4 automatic bids to the SEC and the Big Ten, 2 to the ACC and the Big 12, and 1 to the highest ranked group of 5 champion. It would also include between 1 and 3 at-large spots, one of which is designated for Notre Dame, should it finish inside the top 14. Skinny, what are your thoughts on potentially expanding the college football playoff after just 2 years?
Yeah, 16 would be the cap. I don't want to go high. 16, I'm not opposed to 16. 16 I'm fine with. Because there's going to be 4 worthy SEC teams in my opinion. There's going to be 4 worthy Big 10 teams in my opinion. And I like the fact you're giving a couple to the ACC and the Big 12. I'm fine with that.
Hold on. There are 4 Big 10 worthy teams, you think?
Yeah.
So that means this year we would have been talking about Oregon, Indiana, Penn State, and Ohio State were the top 4 teams, right?
Oh, pretty good.
But if you go into your conference tournament and you're saying those teams have a chance, that means teams like Illinois and Iowa are now competing for a chance. You really want to see Illinois or Iowa playing for a chance?
No, I think you'll get Michigan back in that mix at some point.
I'm just talking about this year. What we would have had this year.
If they played their way into it, sure.
Oh God, I don't need to see Brett Bielema's team out there playing in the playoffs. And here's the real problem with this, Skinny. The actual playoff system, which by the way, I thought this year went really well. I'd love to see it actually be given a chance to work in its current form before we start changing it. Maybe you could change a little bit how you seed it, obviously, because we talked about some of the issues there, but I really don't think you'd already need to be expanding. Here's the real issue with all this, though. You will have completely demolished the regular season for the sport. You don't need to win non-conference games now. The only thing that matters is where you finish in your conference. You're playing for 4 automatic bids in the SEC and Big Ten. Your non-conference game, you can go 0-3 in non-conference now.
Whoa. You're also playing for seeds.
But what's that? Your seed's only going to come from your conference.
No, it's not. Your seed will come from your overall resume. You're going to be put in the tournament based on what you did in the conference, but to be the 1 seed, wouldn't you want to be the 1 seed playing a 16 seed?
Oh, you're talking about for the actual college football playoff. I thought you were talking about your conference tournament.
Yeah, no. For the conference.
Okay, a little bit of that, but you're still drastically changing the significance of the regular season.
Oh, I don't think you are at all. I think the regular season takes on just as much meaning because, again, you're playing for seed line. I mean, the NFL, just because I go 9-8 and win the AFC South or NFC South, usually gives me a crappy seed, unfortunately. I want to be the 1 seed in my conference.
I mean, Bengals made the Super Bowl a couple years ago without it.
Well, again, I'm not here to tell you a 9 can't beat an 8, can't beat a 1. That happens all the time. But I'd still rather have the best seed and the best draw possible.
Yeah, you'd like to have it, but I'm just the sport will change significantly, especially in the transfer portal and NIL era. Those first couple games, oh God, we're gonna have teams scheduling just at the absolute dregs now in the non-conf. It's going to be terrible.
Well,
they say they're going to schedule tougher because it won't matter as much. They won't. They'll schedule weaker.
Well, unless we get the Big Ten SEC challenge matchup where the champions from the year before play each other, second place plays each other, third plays each other, and all the way on down the line.
Yeah, and then you get 2 cupcakes with that, and those games won't matter because you're playing for your
conference. Anyway, I mean, what did Ohio State play non-league? I'm not knocking it, but what did they play in the non-league?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember what their schedule was this year.
It was trash.
Okay.
And I get it.
All right. So you want expansion?
I want expansion.
All right. Bengals. ESPN sources say the Bengals are going to try and re-sign the big three. Skinny, breaking news.
I saw that story and I went, yeah, and I'm trying to save for a Porsche. I mean, what does try mean? And who didn't think they're not trying? No one, even the most ardent critic doesn't believe they're not going to try, right?
Yeah, the second point is the bigger one, is like who didn't think this was already happening? I mean, this has been reported 155 times just in the last month.
Yeah,
You needed sources for this?
Yeah, this is dog bites man. This isn't man bites dog. It would have been a story if it had been the other way around. The Bengals don't plan to re-sign Jamar Chase or Tee Higgins or
Yeah.
Trey Hendrickson.
Bengals have changed their mind.
I literally saw that one, and then people take it and run with it like it's gospel. Who, again, define the word try for me. This is literally the Bengals planting to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler of the whole, hey, we need some good PR at the moment. I just want to put out a story that we are going to try to sign these guys. Oh, okay, you're going to try? Okay,
do you even think it's that at this point? Or do you think it's Jeremy Fowler just doing what he needs to do? He's reading reports on Twitter and he's like, all right, I got to put something out here because it's been said by other people.
I'm sure he had a source on this of some kind. I'm sure it's from the Bengals, who are literally just because everybody right now is wringing their hands and the Bengals are going to try to sign their guys. And they're not going to try to sign. Well, that noise gets back to them enough to where then they go, hey, listen, I just want you guys to know we're trying. But what does try mean? If the word plan had been in there, then I'd say, okay, now we got a story. The Bengals plan to sign. Okay, so then you got a plan. Try. There's a lot of things to try. I'm going to try to go shovel my driveway before I leave my house today. I may not get to it. I may just drive out of the damn driveway without shovel, but I'm sure as hell going to try.
Yeah, the other problem with all this is then we have 150 different outlets here covering the Bengals that all need to aggregate content. So if someone says anything about
that, I didn't even talk. I laughed at it. I sent a text to a couple of colleagues who work for other places, and they're like, yeah, I rolled my eyes at that. It was a total eye roller.
Well, but half the sites blogged about it and posted it. So that's the other part. These things always get more legs because all the local media members then tweet their little content that they got. And I get it. Everyone's got to get page views. Everyone's got a job to do. But it gets a little old reading the same reports over and over and over. The other thing that came out this week, Skinny, is the salary cap is going up another 25-ish million in the NFL, which means the Bengals and the rest of the NFL teams will have more money to spend this offseason. It also means players will be asking for more money. And that brought up Jordan Schultz of Fox Sports reported that Jamar Chase will command at least $40 million per season for his impending contract extension. The expected value of his contract last year, according to SpotRack, had the Bengals got it done, was closer to $30 million per year. What do you believe that the Bengals cost themselves a lot of money by not signing Jamar to an extension last year?
Probably, but at the same time, I don't believe 30 was the number they were going to set. I think we're somewhere in the north of 35 to 38 to maybe even 40 last year. I think that number was in that same almost ballpark as last year. So don't think for a second that, oh yeah, and I'm not blaming because I go to SpotRack for those kind of things all the time, and I don't take them as gospel.
That didn't come from me. Yeah,
no, I know that's no, but they give you at least a ballpark to play with, and I think they do a really good job of that. So I'm not crapping on them either. But trust me, we know it was going to be way north of that number.
Well, we talked about this during the season because everyone kept talking about, well, see, he's going to win the Triple Crown now. The Bengals cost themselves so much money. And I was like, well, we don't know that. Last year, again, the projection was around $30 million. But then Justin Jefferson reset the market with a $35 million per year deal. And Jamar already told us, I'm not taking Justin's deal, and I'm not taking a little bit more than Justin. I want to crush his deal. So that leads me to believe we're probably closer to 40 million last year when you were talking about that. So the reports that this year he's up to 40 million tells me the Bengals probably knew where it was heading. They probably knew he was going to be around 40 million this year. And when he was asking them for 40 million last year, they were like, well, we'll just wait and pay you that next year. I mean, that's going to be what you're asking for next year when the numbers go up.
Yeah, and again, they had him under contract, not just for last year, but also he's still under contract for this year. And so, yeah, I don't, because again, I know, let's slow down for a second. Listen, I'm going to what if he had gotten hurt this past season to the point where he could never play again, and you're on the hook when you already had him under contract for 2 more years, and you decided to go ahead and get this thing done because it's what the fans wanted, and then he gets hurt and he's never the same, and you all of a sudden are on the hook for $160 million of guaranteed, or $120 million, let's say, of guaranteed money. Then what?
Yeah. And by the way, you
It's
would have.
bad business. And I know people think the other way is bad business, that they didn't take care of him. No, that's bad business.
Yeah, the Jamar Chase one is one I really have never had a problem with because of all the reports that came out about it. They seem to all kind of be in line with exactly what we're talking about here. He was probably asking for a deal that was way above what the number was projected to be last year. So they sat there and thought, wait, why don't we've got you under contract for 2 more years. You could get hurt this year anyways, or have a setback type of year where maybe we get a discount. And if not, we're going to have more money and more cap space to work with next year to get that deal done anyway. So, I don't think they cost themselves that much more money by letting him play this year and him having a magnificent year.
I fully agree with you.
The Bengals are also expected to franchise tag Tee Higgins. That was reported this week. Skinny, what does that mean as it relates to getting an extension done with him now?
Yeah, and that's not shocking either. I mean, it's a procedural thing. So they have until the window opened up on whatever day, well, Tuesday at 4 o'clock. You could start tagging players. The window closes on March the 4th. Um, Obviously, you're not going to just let him walk into free agency, right? You're not just going to let him leave. So tagging him at least would give you the control to continue to negotiate a contract until July 15th. That's the window they can do. And in a worst case scenario, you get to the point where you're going to ask him to play on the tag. But there's also, it also puts into play the potential to tag and trade him. So this is procedural. I think it shows that it's just a smart move to do, because again, you don't want to let him just walk to free agency and get nothing in return for him. I don't know if it means that they're close to a deal, not close to a deal. I know I've heard people talk about, why haven't they been talking to him and getting something. You literally were not allowed to talk contract extension with Tee Higgins until the end of the regular season. That's part of the franchise tag rule. So if you're wondering why didn't they start these talks back in September or October or November, you couldn't do it until the Bengals played their last game. So the window from the last game to now, it seems long. It really hasn't been that long. And again, just to keep the window open, put the tag on him by March the 4th. And maybe by March the 4th, they do have a contract in place. But if they don't, well, then, yeah, it makes all the sense in the world, because then it gives you, again, a period of time from March 4th to July 15th to continue to negotiate. And if you can't get to a deal at that point, well, he's on the franchise tag for another year. And then the ball's in his court if he wants to play on the franchise tag or not. I'm going to guess he will.
Jordan Schultz also said that his sources believed Higgins could have gotten upwards of $30 million annual average salary on the open market. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think he's approaching that type of stratosphere as well?
I do. And so that's the part we've talked about on this podcast numerous times, of where do you draw the line if you're the Bengals? And I don't know where you draw the line. Do you draw it at 30 mil? Do you draw it at 28 mil? And again, I hate to do this because I like T as a player. I like T as a person. And I think the Bengals are better with Tee Higgins. That part's clear. But the guy's missed 5 games each of the last 2 years. You're paying him 17 game checks, and he's only played 12 games each of the last 2 seasons. And I get it. It's not his fault. He's been hurt. But it suggests that this guy does have an injury history. He's got an injury history with soft tissue and hamstrings. And so am I going to pay for a guy that I'm going to get 12 to 13 games out of? Am I paying him that kind of money, just crossing my fingers that he gets to 17? And maybe he does. And I get to that point on the open market, that's probably going to be the going rate for Tee Higgins. So if that's what you feel like as an agent you can get on the open market, you're going to ask the current team he's with for something similar to that. And so the question for you is, for fans, is where do you draw the line here? And that's the part to me, is I don't know where that line is. Is it 28? Is it 30? If they ask for 32, do you go? And at that point, then whose fault is it? Is it the Bengals' fault because they balked at a number that got to a ridiculous point? Or is it T's camp's fault for taking it too high with the current team that could slap the franchise tag back on him?
Yeah, and I think realistically for fans, for media people, especially in a year where that salary cap is going up a bunch, it's impossible to know what that number is.
Correct.
Like what the right number is, what number they're going to be at, and where those arguments are going to fall. It's tough to know. So my guess is, if they get something done, everyone will praise them for it, and if they don't, everyone will crush the Bengals for it. And
I think the only
maybe
place
that's right. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the only place the Bengals should get crushed for this, if they don't get it done, is if we find out they lowballed him. That part to me would be the one that you and I don't know if we find that out.
Yeah.
Bengals certainly aren't going to release that, but again, maybe the agent does. Maybe the agent says, "Hey, they only offered us this. Here's where we're at," and if that's the case, if the Bengals lowball him in this case, well, then shame on them. But if it gets to the stratosphere part of it, where they've taken it to a number that just isn't comfortable for the Bengals, there's a part of me that may not be able to blame them in this. But again, if we find out that the Bengals said, no, we want 20, we want to give you 24 mil average annual, and they're at 30. Well, the middle part's 27 and a half to 28. Could you meet at that part? And the Bengals, if they don't balk at that part, then okay, then they deserve to be crushed for that. So let's just see how this plays out.
It just feels like the narrative for the agent is easy to spin if it
No
doesn't work.
question.
It's really easy to put the pressure on the Bengals, put the
No
onus on
doubt.
the Bengals and say they didn't work with us. And most people will believe you in that case. So and the thing is he's going to be franchise tagged this year. So it's not like you're going to turn around and sign with someone else and we'll know what the contract was, right? I mean, he's on
Right.
the franchise tag for this year. So that is what it is. Then the Bengals announced that they have signed second-year punter Ryan Rico to a 2-year contract extension through the 2026 NFL season. That would seem like good news, Skinny. He lived up to expectations, right?
He
Not that there
did.
were any for him coming in.
But pity poor Brad Robbins. Lost his year last year to injury. They bring the kid in, the kid out kicks
Well,
him, and well, that's what happens in this league sometimes. Take advantage of your opportunities. And he did. I mean, to his credit, he was really good. He struggled a little bit at times holding the ball, but for the most part, from a punting perspective, I thought he was terrific.
Do you think that that's like not a concern at all? You think they got all the holding stuff worked out, the kicking game's fine?
Yes, some of it too. Darren Simmons talked about. Cal Adamitis also struggled at times with consistency of snaps, and if you go back and look at some of it, he's obviously not wrong. I mean, he's not fibbing us. I mean, if you look back at some of the snaps, you're like, ooh, that was a tough one to handle, and so. Yeah, I think he did. I think he got better as the year went along. I mean, I know we all slam him for the Baltimore drop snap, the one that cost him the overtime home game, but part of that operation was the snap wasn't all that clean either.
Yep. All right, we've got a couple of Ask Any things to get
Do
to
it.
here. Aside from any phone functions like calling or texting, what is Skinny's most frequently opened app on his cell phone?
My CBS Sports app, probably looking at scores and looking at games ahead and all that stuff. Yeah, I would clearly say my CBS Sports app. My email's on there too, so I'm a big. I mean, we all do it. I have two emails, a personal email and a work email, so I'm on there looking at email a lot.
I would include that in phone functions at this
Okay,
point. That
fair
feels
enough.
like text to me. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
fair
they're
enough.
looking for the fun stuff. Like what
Yeah, no,
what do you click on when you're like trying to buy 5 minutes or whatever?
yeah, my
Yeah,
CBS
of course.
Sports app. Yeah, for
All
sure,
right.
my CBS Sports app. I would tell you this: I don't have TikTok on my phone.
You're not scrolling. You're not doom scrolling through TikTok.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good.
Rank these sports scandals from favorite to least favorite.
Oh my gosh.
Astros sign stealing, baseball's PEDs, Deflategate, Lance Armstrong doping, and the Tim Donaghy NBA official point shaving scandal.
I so here's the question: favorite in which way? The one that I like enjoyed the meltdown of it, or
I thought that I didn't know how to take that question either. I kind of laughed when I read it. It was just like your favorite scandal. I guess the one you found most entertaining to follow.
the least entertaining is Lance Armstrong. It's one guy I just don't care about cycling. I'm sorry, I don't.
Amen.
Live
Although,
strong.
I mean, the
Live
Live
strong.
Strong bracelets were such a
They were
cultural
a thing.
thing that,
They were a
that is
thing.
kind of a crazy element to it.
Live strong for sure.
Yeah.
I know that this is going to sound awful. I'm a big sportsmanship guy. I really and truly am. I that's part of what I enjoy about coaching is when there's. In fact, we played a game last Friday and beat the crap out of a team. I mean, Trimble County was the team we played. It was senior night, and a couple of
Appreciate you giving them the shout out for the beatdown.
I know, but I will tell you, there was a couple of not dirty physical plays where like guys got spilled to the court, and this kid for Trimble County made a point multiple times to help our guy off the floor. And in the handshake line, I literally said to him, I said, that was really good sportsmanship. And he kind of looked at me and goes, I appreciate that, coach, very much. And I'm a big sportsmanship guy. But the one thing I can't grasp my head around is why the Astros sign stealing thing is such a damn big deal. I'm sorry. I mean, that's part of the sport, isn't it? It's always been part of the sport.
Well, I mean, weren't they doing some things that were legitimately illegal though?
Sure,
I mean,
banging on the garbage can.
I mean, not just the trash cans, but weren't they like inside the
Yeah.
using electronic stuff to
Leo DeRocher used to have a guy in a Wrigley Field scoreboard doing that crap years ago. And they had back in the Polo Grounds, they'd have the guy with the binocs on. Come on, flashing the lights and stuff.
Yeah, I don't. Sign stealing doesn't bother me that much either. I guess
I mean, I
you
know
still got to do it, right? I mean, like
right.
you still got to hit
Correct.
the pitch.
Correct. All right. So what were the other ones?
The one that they didn't list was the Michigan thing that just happened recently. That would have been a good one to include on here. But you had baseball's PEDs, Deflategate, and Tim Donaghy.
Yeah, I'll go Deflategate third because every team does mess with their footballs. I mean,
Yeah.
not everybody has a giant hand. I mean, Joe Burrow doesn't have all that big of a hand for a quarterback, and he's talked about sometimes grip issues. So yeah, that one I mean, they weren't playing with a Nerf ball when he was out on the field. I get people being because it's the Patriots and it always gets magnified. It is. But
And they had the
everybody,
spine thing too with the
yeah,
cameras.
that's the one that's worse in my
Yeah.
opinion. I mean that one was bad. Speaking of which, do you remember the story from a few years ago up in Cleveland where a Bengals security guy caught them trying to do something similar?
Yes.
That was the best. Rusty was his name, and so we were all oblivious. It happened off to our right as the game was being played, so we're focusing on the game.
Yeah, you were there. Bengals were playing the Browns when it happened.
Bengals were playing the Browns, and all you heard at one point was him saying to the guy, "The die has been cast, my friend." Like the most ominous thing ever. Like the guy kept trying to weasel his way out of it. Like, no, we're just shooting for no, we've got you. Okay, can we just pack up and go? And all you just hear, "The die has been cast, my friend." It was
That's an
just
amazing movie line right there.
yes, it was. It was terrific. So anyway, so number two to me would be then the PEDs in baseball because let's face facts. Don't tell me that those did not affect the game in a significant way. Go look at numbers.
Oh yeah. I mean, God, that felt like an entire era of my life. I mean, that felt like
I
10 years
think
of my life we talked about that.
yeah, the only thing that would knock that down a peg is that most everyone was doing it. The thing I always talked about in that era was if I was a player who was not doing it, I would have ratted everybody out. You know why? Because I'm not doing it, and I'm a second baseman hitting 10 homers, driving in 52, and batting 280, and Brett Boone's hitting 45 home runs. He's costing my ass money.
That's the thing. You're all not getting paid because all these other dudes are cheating.
Yeah, no,
I agree with you. I can't believe there weren't more rats during that whole thing.
I am too. Number one's Tim Donnie. I mean, you got an NBA ref doing that. I mean,
Crazy.
gracious alive.
And it's completely called into question officiating in every sport for all time. I mean,
Correct. And that's the sad part about it. And probably it happens more than we would like to know.
People have always talked about it and referenced it being a thing, but until this, it didn't feel like we had a
Right.
really clear modern story of it.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm sure it still does happen to some degree that we'll never be able to figure out. I mean, it's probably a subtle call here and a subtle call there, but it's not all of them. And unfortunately, it casts a pall over everybody.
Yeah. Now, every questionable call you do wonder. I mean, I'm in Horizon League games sometimes wondering where I see a certain official make 2 or 3 strange calls in a row. I'm going, is that dude shaving points right now? I mean, honest to God, I really believe it sometimes because, like, there are certain things you see where it's a pattern. You're just like, that is inexplicable. That dude just made 3 calls in a row like that. And it's like, Tim Donaghy did that to me, man. I can't help it.
Yeah. No, so I'll put that one at the top. Which one would you put at the top?
I'm with you. Donaghy's the craziest one to me and the most interesting. The book was interesting. That's really, I mean, baseball PEDs felt like it controlled so much of my childhood. Like it was a huge thing every single year for a long time. And Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa were such a big part of my childhood with sports that, yeah, that would definitely be second for me.
Yeah, huge like Barry Bonds' head.
Yeah, yes, exactly. If Skinny had to play a round of golf with a character from any golf movie, who would he choose?
See, I don't know if he could play as a player, but the Francis Wee May story with oh my gosh, I can't think of the actor's name now. He was in Transformers. Who's the actor who's in Transformers?
The younger guy, the Sasha or
Yeah, I'm
the
drawing
guy
a
that used to
total
be
blank.
the Disney guy.
Correct. Yes, correct. What's his name? I'm drawing a total blank.
I want to say Sacha Baron Cohen, but that's the
No,
comedian.
that's not it. I know. Sacha Baron Cohen's. That's not him.
Yeah.
What's his name? I'm drawing a blank.
He was the Even Stevens guy. Shia
Yes.
LaBeouf.
Thank you, Shia LaBeouf. Yes, Shia LaBeouf. I thought he was good in that movie. I liked that one. But who wouldn't want to play around with Shooter McGavin? I mean, just doing Shooter all day.
Yeah. Right? Plus, you'd want to beat him so bad.
Correct, because he's just a smarmy. Have I ever told you the Shooter McGavin story?
Not to my recollection.
So this is 20 some odd years ago. When I was still in radio, we were doing my broadcast partner Tom. Yeah, we were doing we were broadcasting from the Kentucky Derby site. So we would do what's called Radio Row, kind of like the Super Bowl, and we had 2 days worth of that. And then on the Friday night before the Derby, we went to a Three Doors Down concert that was outside at a Jillian's, and our good friend Jeff Pecoro supposedly got myself and my friend who I was there with into this after party. It was sponsored by Crown Royal. So we go up to the table and say our name, and guys like, nah. So my buddy, doing a really quick thing. He looks down the list and he goes, Tom Cornelius. After he'd already given him one name, he goes, "Oh, yeah, here you are, Mr. Cornelius. Yeah, two. Yeah, you're good." Well, Tom Cornelius, by the way, worked for like Entertainment Television. So we went on Tom Cornelius's thing. So we sneak in, and there's Tara Reid standing at the bar, and
Nice.
there's Shooter standing at the bar. And I didn't do it. I just stood there. I shoot him again. That's pretty cool. And I didn't think anything of it. I'm getting my drink, and he's getting a drink, and 20 people, Shooter, Shooter. Finally, he looks over at me. I look over, and I go, "That's got to get old." He goes, "You have no idea."
Yeah, I mean, I always get annoyed when people like, for instance, the guys that do the Marvel roles or the Avengers stuff, then they're like, they want to do interviews and be like, well, I'm a real actor. I don't really like being known for that Marvel's role. Oh, you don't? Okay, well then hand back the millions and
Yeah,
millions and
right.
millions of dollars you weren't doing it, right? Like, you should be flattered. You should be thankful that people know you as your character from these things. But that's one where it's so annoying
Right.
nonstop and people are probably so rude about it.
And to his credit, he was good about it, but I could just tell it was like, and I literally, when he looked at me, I think he was expecting me to do it. I go, "That's just got to get old." He goes, "You have
Yeah.
no idea." Now, that being said, I believe, wasn't he in a suit? He's still made other commercials with that character. In fact, I think he was in a Super Bowl commercial this year,
Yeah.
wasn't he?
I mean, how could you not? No offense to him, but like, I don't know him from anything else. I know he was in
I
some other
do.
stuff, but I
Yeah,
don't know him from anything else. So,
right.
like, that kind of is one you got to roll with a little bit. That's keeping you relevant for years to come in that role.
No
You,
question.
you can do some more commercials off that.
Yeah, no question about it. So there we
Yeah.
go.
All right. That's all we got.
All right, thanks very much. We'll be back next week with another version of this podcast. For Rick Broering, I'm Richard Skinner. It's been the Skinny Podcast, the weekly potpourri edition, presented by Blake, the Attorney Mason.